Hello everyone, Nadeem here with PC.Solutions.Net. So again, I'm working from my parents' place, so here I am. So the quarantine is kind of still on. So I wanted to talk about Windows Virtual Desktop. You've probably heard about it. If you haven't, well, let me explain what it is. So you've probably heard of remote desktop services where you can log into a server, whether it's at your office or in the cloud, and you can have all your users working off of this one server. So each user gets their own desktop carved out of this one server, and users work on it day in and day out just like they do on their local machine. The user's local machine ends up becoming kind of like a dumb terminal, like in the old days you used to have dumb terminals. So it kind of ends up becoming something like that, and all the processing and the heavy lifting is done by the server on the other side of that connection. So that's all well and good. The only problem that sometimes we run into is there are certain applications that do not work very well on a server grade operating system. So in other words, they work well on Windows 10, but they have a problem working with Windows Server 2019 Standard or Data Center Edition. So there is a fix for that. So Microsoft came out with something called Windows Virtual Desktop. It is a service. It is only available in Azure, the Azure cloud. So you can't get it with any place else. So what it is, it's Windows 10, just like the one that you have on your PC, multi-user enabled, so you can have multiple sessions on this one version of Windows simultaneously. And that's the key word, because Windows has been multi-user back from Windows 3.1 Workgroup Edition, right? The difference here is that you can have simultaneous multiple sessions to Windows 10 now, which was not possible until just like a few months ago, until Windows Virtual Desktop came along. So this is a game changer, because now you have a desktop class operating system that has been retweaked and has the robustness of a server grade operating system, can support multiple users simultaneously on the back end. The only problem is that you can only get it if you have, if you set up your infrastructure on Windows Azure. You cannot get it on AWS. You cannot get it on Google Cloud or with IBM. You can't get it anywhere else. And so this brings in, a few benefits, and let's look at what Microsoft has to say about Windows Virtual Desktop. So it's the only multi-session Windows 10 experience. There's no other place you can get this. You have the operating system now optimized for Office 365 Pro Plus. So this has been one of the things where we as service providers have had to jump through hoops to make Office 365 work well under Windows Server 2019 or any version of Windows Server for multiple users under remote desktop services. So that's one of the things that they've done. Microsoft actually purchased another company, which I'll talk about maybe in another video, called FSLogix. So Microsoft purchased a company back in 2018 called FSLogix. They've been working on the back end to integrate that with Windows 10 to come up with this Windows Virtual Desktop operating system for the cloud. And now it's all baked. It's all ready to go. It's in production right now, so you can actually deploy it right now. So you can use Windows Virtual Desktop in similar capacities like you would Windows Remote Desktop Services. So you can have the whole desktop available to users, or you can make individual applications available to users, right? It scales well. So in other words, you can have, for example, you can have 2 or more machines in the cloud, and then you might have 200 or 300 users. These users are automatically assigned to different hosts that are available. So the host, the operating system is separate from the user profile data. So the user data is separate. The host is separate. So here's how it works. So you have, let's say, 2 hosts, just for simplicity, and then you have 2 users. So when one user logs in, maybe that user logs into host A, the second user logs in, the system will automatically log the second user to host B. And that's configurable on the back end, right? So now let's say it's the next day and both users log on, and now the second user logs in first. So of course the second user ends up logging into host A because that's the first one available. So what happens to the user settings, the desktop settings, the favorites, the applications, all the customizations? How will they go from host to host? Because on the back end, the host is now different, right? That's what FSLogix brings to the table. It separates the user data from the OS data. So now that user can be connected to any host on the back end, but the user has the same experience like nothing changed. And the reason that's important is because now we can scale up the servers on the back end, right? So as more and more users log in, we can add more servers to the farm. And we can actually set up a logic. So for example, we can say if each server has a total of 10 users logged in, then spin up another server. And we can control that. So since each user environment is different, each company environment is different, we can control that, customize it for each company to where we can automatically scale up. We can spin up additional servers as the load increases, and then spin down these servers as the load decreases. And that's important because if you are in the cloud, the more servers you deploy, the more you're paying, right? So it's important to scale everything back down as the load decreases. So this optimizes cost, and it gives the users a seamless experience, just like they would on their desktop machines itself. And they can, and of course users can be connected from any device, their tablets, terminals, or regular PCs, doesn't matter. So that's what Windows Virtual Desktop is, and one of the key technologies that enabled Microsoft to do this, to build everything together, bring it all together, is this little company that they bought back in 2018 called FSLogix. And one of these days I might go into some details on how FSLogix does this. It's so simple, it's brilliant, and it works well. I mean, we've been testing this technology for a while now, and it works well. Of course, the next question everybody's thinking about is, well, what about the customers that have already deployed Windows Server 2019 or 2016 or any of the Windows server class VMs in the cloud for their users? There is no migration path. So if you have deployed Windows Server and your users are logging into Windows Server, then I would say keep it where it's at. To move them to Windows Virtual Desktop, it's a totally new deployment. So for certain other customers that are thinking of deploying again, or if they want to move to Windows Virtual Desktop, if there are certain applications that don't work and Windows 10 is the only way to go, then we can set up whole new infrastructure and switch users over from the server side to the workstation side. So but it's really Microsoft has solved a long-standing problem that we've had. I mean, it's been ever since Microsoft signed the deal with Citrix to start doing remote desktop services in-house back when it was called terminal services. It's been a problem because we've had to use a server grade operating systems, and certain apps had a problem, and this and that. It was all kinds of things, right? But now all that is gone away. The only restriction now is this technology is only available in Microsoft's Azure cloud. You cannot deploy it on your hardware. You cannot deploy it in any other cloud. It's just in Azure. So that's the only restriction at this point. And I don't think this restriction is going to go away, because it's basically, it differentiates Microsoft's cloud from every other cloud out there. One of the other benefits of deploying Windows 10 in Windows Virtual Desktop is that Windows 10 is a much smaller kernel, right? The kernel is different, right? Not the kernel, but the OS is different. So the OS size itself is much smaller with all the similar capabilities as Windows Server, but in Windows 10. So what that means is now you can have, where in the past, if you could have 30 users on one server, now maybe you can have 35 users on one Windows Virtual Desktop machine, just because the OS is smaller, thinner, more efficient, more geared for desktop use. But that's it. So I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, everybody, have a good day and be safe out there.